As a child growing up in Nigeria, I was surrounded with people who spoke over 250 dialects.
I don't want to be on a plane with somebody that was there flying the plane just because of DEI.
As leaders, the intentions, the voices, the issues we choose to stand by and raise up, if we continue at that pace, I think we're going to see a difference, right?
If people question me that I got some preferential treatment, my humble answer is, other than the return on investment to my employer, I gave 4 good citizens, including 1 doctor who will serve for life. And for whom? The citizens of this country. Diversity. The concept is not new to the world, but it gained momentum and became a business narrative, especially around 2020. Experts and the data analysts, they both suggest that more diverse organizations are more profitable. Yet, since 2023, many companies announced withdrawal of their diversity and cultural awareness programs. The question is, why? We will talk about all of this in our today's podcast on Decoding Diversity. Friends, this is Lakshmikant, the host at Mastergy's Purpose DEI Lab. With me, I have a co-host, Azara Anna from Global Peace Media. And to share some insights and ground level stories, we have a very special guest from Deloitte, Amasadi Ogiamian. Amasadi is a partner in Deloitte's risk and financial advisory practice with over 20 years of experience in finance transformation. She is a seasoned diversity champion and is deeply committed to leadership development, mentoring hundreds of professionals and actively participating in various industry forums and organizations, including the National MS Society and Deloitte's CFO program. Amasadi, welcome.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
So let's start with you, Amasadi. So if you can share your story about diversity and your perspective, that would be great.
Yeah, certainly. So let me just start really quickly with how I grew up, right? I'm of Nigerian descent. I spent the first 14 years of my life there. And for most people, they just, in America, everyone's Nigerian, one color, one set of people. As a child growing up in Nigeria, I was surrounded with people who spoke over 250 dialects. And at any given point in time of the day, you will run into more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different dialects in a day. In addition, Nigerians are very conscious of their social status. So at any given point in time in the day, you could find yourself in a very affluent neighborhood, or you can find yourself even not 2 minutes later in a very poor neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pendulum swings so fast at the extremes. On top of that, I grew up to realize, appreciate, celebrate, accept. I don't even know if there was a decision to accept. It's just, I was just born into difference. And difference was okay. Difference was fine. Difference was what made everybody unique. And so growing up in that kind of a background, and I won't forget the elderly and the importance of incorporating them in day-to-day activity and the family values and so on and so forth. So that was my upbringing. And coming to the US, I came into a little bit of a rude awakening, a significant difference whereby, everything I had just experienced and grew up in America, I was just seen as maybe one color. It was just a color, right? Whereas I grew up with no color lines. There was no color lines. If you made it in life, it's because you really, really put in a lot of effort. And if you happen to have very wealthy parents, socially, you were very empathetical to the people who didn't have anything. You knew that at some point in time in your life, you had to give back, help out, do your own bit. So that was my background. And so coming from that lens and coming into the US, and now at the wake of what happened in 2020, I just think the world now sees diversity, equity, or saw diversity, equity, and inclusion very differently, right? It
Mm-hmm.
took that level of pain and stress and catastrophe and social uprising to bring shed light, bring this very important issue to bear, right? And so the good news of that is a lot of companies responded. I want to also say that somehow maybe COVID had something to do with it as well, because for once in a very long time, we started talking about, social and humanitarian implications and sustainability, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you take all of those things and you add them together, there was something that happened back in 2020 that really triggered a cry for help. And hey, listen, for most part, a lot of organizations stood up to address that. So to me, and I know we're going to get into that. To me, diversity, inclusion, equity, it is a fundamental just appreciation for humanity that each one of us, every single person is different. And that difference has value. And half the time is trying to figure out what's the value of that difference and how do we bring it together in a productive way.
Yeah, I also agree. And it's interesting to me that your life mirrors my life in terms of early upbringing. I grew up in a very tiny town of only 200 people in southern Sicily. There was no diversity around me at all. There were strong values of family, faith, friends, and food. And that's what I knew growing up. So imagine as a small child coming to the East Coast of America, total immersion in diversity, right? People of all different races and backgrounds, all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, it's like the whole world opened up to me. And since that point in time, I understood that the differences of people and races and backgrounds and countries was so valuable because we all have rich cultural history and heritage to bring to the holistic picture of the entire planet. We can each learn and benefit from one another. And I would wish that everyone felt that way, but obviously not everyone feels that way. Look at the strife and crisis on the planet today. So anyone like you, Omesity, that is doing this important work of bringing forth inclusion, diversity, equity onto the planet is an absolutely valuable asset and contribution. So I want to thank you for your work.
And I like to believe that we are unconsciously training our younger generation, our children, to be aware of the differences. And sometimes I feel like ignorance is actually the better way of dealing with diversity. When I was growing up, we think about Muslims, Sikhs, people speaking different languages, Amosity, as you said as well. They were all welcomed at our home during celebrations, festivals, without us even knowing that they are different. So there was no question of discrimination. Coming to Amosity, you, given your experiences with whatever happening since late 2023, the question is why companies are withdrawing these programs. Where is the problem? Where is the gap between what diversity in action should be and what it currently is?
Yeah, that's a question that started. So we started seeing signals of companies slowing down, I'd say about a year ago. The global economic implications, I mean, I serve a lot of clients. Most of the time, I'm talking to billion-dollar organizations, right? Billion plus plus. It's a privilege, actually. And you're talking to them, and you see that they are fundamentally having a problem on in meeting their margins, meeting their goals, and being able to demonstrate how they were good stewards of their resources, right? And whoever is not performing, I might have to either reshape or stop doing or get rid of or whatever. So that's sometimes where it starts, right? So I'll park
Mm-hmm.
that there just to
Yeah.
give some context. Because you say, well, who's not performing well? Oh, this diversity team. What are they actually doing? What what precisely have they done? I haven't seen any workshop. I haven't seen any diversity programs. I haven't. They haven't. I and then you so that's on the block, right? That becomes on the block a question like, what is this? What value is this group driving? So then you say, okay, well, so that's number one. What's the value that you can tie financial to metrics? The second thing that why we're seeing some of these things, this diversity in action, slow down a bit, is you look at the just even how people are chosen. You know, um, it's very difficult to bring a minority person, someone who's of the minority, to lead the majority with limited resources and limited clarity on how we're going to measure success from the leadership team. That is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
It is, and if you look back in 2020, 21, 22, and you go back and just for kicks and giggles, you pull up the corporate boards and you see who is the new chief diversity officer. I want to say about 60% of them would be minority. And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they probably have a team of less than one or five. They probably require everybody else on top of their normal day job to quote unquote contribute and to the diversity cause. But don't get me wrong. To actually have diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it has to just be the fabric of how we behave. It just needs to be embedded in the normal. It's kind of like, anyone who has a house will at some point eat. So therefore, there must be some form of a kitchen or a place they call kitchen. It
Mm-hmm.
just has to be ingrained in just how we become and how we are. But instead, oftentimes it's like that notorious compliance department, right? Where you say, "Hey, compliance is responsible for how everybody behaves." Well, that's hard because everybody has to recognize that but they're responsible for doing the right things always, right? So then that's the second part. It's who gets in the role. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people who are diversity leaders are amazing. They're passionate, they're credible, they are driven, they have a will, they are looking to make significant changes in a big way, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
very empathetical, they're looking at the bigger picture. They are very, very effective. But an
Mm-hmm.
effective leader can only go so far when
Right.
behind the scenes they may not be the full support because again, they're minority. People say, well, what have you done lately? Like, why should we believe you? This is a check the box exercise. Let's just do that. I'll
Right.
wrap with I'll wrap with okay, so I'll wrap with just maybe one quick story. So
Mm-hmm.
at the at I did recently, maybe about 3 years ago, I got a call from one of our leaders and he said, "Hey, Amasade, I want you to be the diversity, equity, and inclusion leader for this function for this group." And I spent my whole 20 plus career at Deloitte staying away from any talent matters, right? Because I'm like one out of many. I'm always
Yeah.
one out of many. So why would I do that? I want to be if you want to put me in a sales role and show how I can provide value for the organization, absolutely. But I always believe I can do good when I'm in a place of influence. At least you can go further. So I asked I asked him and I said, "Hey, okay, how are you going to judge the success and of this group that you want me to lead? How much resource budget do you have? What are some of the goals that you would like to outline?" And he said, "Oh, Tomasity, you're the one that's going to define that. Whatever you come up with, I'll be okay with it." And I thought, yeah, no, I don't want to do it. No, thank you. And it's rough. Like I said, no, thank you, because
Yeah.
when someone is in a leadership capacity, take the CEO's job for example. If
Right.
the diversity, equity, and inclusion is not driven from the tone at the top, and
Right.
you're the minority with limited resources, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And on the contrary, if I throw a curveball here, right? The question is, are these diversity purpose leaders trained enough not to be biased? I heard a story from one of the friends recently, and he was talking with one of the diversity officers of a large company, and he was like, I'm just checking the box. I got a leadership position, and it's a good resume building. He was amazed. I was amazed to listen to that story. Who
Wow.
is appointing these diversity leaders? Do they know what diversity means? To your point, do they know what are the benchmarks and how to set those benchmarks, and what are the performance measures they will evaluate these diversity leaders? Um, I mean, sometimes I like to believe that bottom up approach could also be useful, because the Gen Z, right, they are very aware of these issues, what's going on. They have gone through their childhood and colleges, education around diversity. And what if we all, as you said in the beginning, we bring this concept at home, right? We raise our children in a way that they are ready to take this challenge heads on. They are not dependent on this top down initiative of companies. When they are 30 years old, how will we train them to be aware of these differences? It all starts at home.
Mhm.
It does start at home, I agree. But then, of course, they go from the home to the larger educational system. And I think that is one of the problems, the inequality of the education system, that not everybody has access to the same resources, obviously, because if we're talking about the disenfranchised communities, the minority communities, they're not going to be trained enough to be able to fill certain roles. So the dilemma becomes for most companies is how are they going to get the best trained people into those roles? And the question that is asked of me always is, oh, well, Azar, we understand inclusion, we understand diversity, but we don't really understand the word equity. Can you explain to me, Azar, what does equity mean in this context? And sometimes, Lakshmi and Osamity, I'm having a difficulty trying to explain the word equity to people that think, well, I'm all for diversity and inclusion, but if the person is not as well trained, especially in a safety occupation, I don't want to be on a plane with somebody that was there flying the plane just because of DEI. I want to make sure they also are qualified. How do we respond to those people?
Hmm. And I'll defer to Amosity to respond as well. But coming back to the basics, Azara, I see um, this all diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a social effort on part of all of us, businesses, schools, anywhere else, to uplift the community who has potential to rise and give back to the community, give
I
back to
agree.
the society.
Totally
Now,
agree.
yeah, and simply because people look different, they are not able to get the opportunity because of inherent bias. So what we are trying to do here is provide equitable platform to people those are capable. Simply because they look different, they should not be biased out. If I take my example, I was given that opportunity by my employer, and then the question arises, what did I give back? If people question me, that I got some inequitable treatment, or some preferential treatment, my humble answer is, other than the return on investment to my employer, I gave four good citizens, including one doctor who will serve for life, and for whom? The citizens of this country, white, black, or brown. So if all of us take a responsibility to build a better society, I don't think it will be hard to understand these concepts.
Wow, you said that so beautifully. And so I naturally don't have any addition, but I'll tell you, Azara, how I explain what equity means, right? In the
Okay.
most simple way, it's being fair and impartial. And to Lakshmi's point, when I look at my kids, I kind of look at it as a parent. I look at it like raising kids, right?
Yes.
All my kids are invariably very different. They're all have so some things are true. The foundation is true. They both all have the same parents, right? Me and my husband. We
Yes.
all live in the same house. They ate the same thing. Well, maybe some of them were picky, but very invariably we ate the same type of things. They woke up and slept the exact same time, but they are very different. And so my job as a parent is to understand what each of them needs, what is their core strength, and how can I then make that brighter, stronger? Where do they struggle, and then how do you support? But it's doing it fairly, so I'm not overly investing in one and then not investing in the other, right? And so I think take that same view to work. If I have a team of 25 people and I'm always hearing from the same two people, first of all, that would never be my meeting because my meetings are typically successful when I've heard from everybody because I recognize that everybody is bringing something different to the table. So I think at the basic, it's being fair and impartial. Back to the point around, there's been a lot of discrimination in American history, right? Arguably, like if you go back in time, there's been a lot of inequities for a very, very, very long time. And so, how do you then make up, if you will, for this? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not supporting, let's put the people that are not credible in the seats where we need direction, guidance, and leadership, right? I truly think that, we we should do our due diligence and make sure that people are in the right seats in the right time and driving change for an organization or wherever they sit. So I would say that because of all of the inequities that have been going on for so long, there are times when we have to actually make an impartial decision, a very intentional decision to change the status quo. Because if we continue down the status quo, there's been so many systematic biases in the system that intentionally and sometimes unintentionally put certain people at a disadvantage. So sometimes you will find executives who will just make a decision to say, listen, I know that John, Jane, whoever does not have experience. However, I also know that this role has always needed these other different type of experience. And therefore, this person, that's what I need now. And therefore, this is the right person for the job. And you know what? I just want to change it. I want to change the faces. I want to change the diversity of thought. I want to bring in a different level of energy. So I will do that. So, yes, in absolutely critical roles, you don't want to go to the hospital and have a doctor who says, well, I'm not really trained and don't really know what I'm doing, but, I'll do my best on you. Just trust me. I mean, you'll be out of that hospital in no time, right? So
Yes.
so in some areas of our profession, it is absolutely about like those choices and decisions are very intentional to change the status quo.
I mean, we are far, far away from what the good should look like, for sure.
Very far
Um,
away. I agree with that statement. I mean, I'm in a position as the CEO of a global organization, meaning every day, I see DEI everywhere because I'm dealing with people. Today I'll be dealing with someone from Kenya, another person from India, the other person from Lebanon, et cetera, et cetera. So I get to see the rest of the world and how they are handling this same issue over there, because we've had those conversations. And I've always made it a point in my own organizations, if I have choices between people that act as staff or act as volunteers, not only am I going to choose from the pool in this country because the entire world is evolving, I'm going to choose equally qualified people from diverse communities, global communities. For instance, our editor is in Egypt. The person doing some website is from India. The other one is from Sri Lanka. I mean, it's all over the place. So I have the gift of grace, literally, of being immersed in this entire DEI situation simply by the structure of my organization and my intentional approach to be inclusive, not only nationally, but internationally.
And the stereotyping and the unconscious bias, all these are adding to the problem. Often, when people look at me, they tag me that you are a techie or you are a IT person. Nothing bad to be techie or an IT, but it's a stereotype. When we look at someone, almost unconsciously, the first thing we notice is how the person looks like, man or woman, black or white or brown, Asian, Indian, South Indian, North Indian. We keep going. There's no limit. And that brings us to the point that sometimes the majority feels that what did I do bad? Why not me? Why all the minorities consider themselves as marginalized groups? And how about me? What's in it for me? So how do we respond to that question?
The statement of, I think we now carry, and I'm including myself in the younger generation.
Mhm.
Sorry, Lakshmi, I'm never getting old. Anyway, so mission number one is, be the change that I want to see, right?
Mhm.
Remember the things that I went through as a young professional that really challenged me to question who I was and, how I was contributing and why did I want to be a part of this organization. Going back to the story where, one of the leaders asked me to be a D&I leader. And I said, what's the metric and what do you want to accomplish? And they said, that's for you to figure out. I thought it was a little bit, stubborn at the time. I didn't really appreciate the fact that he was actually giving me a platform. And whatever I decided to do with that platform was really up to me, right? So that was another way that I could have looked at the situation. So I took that same same job and I
Mhm.
said, fine, I'm going to do this job and I'm going to do it well. But you know what I'm going to do this time? Rather than coming up with a program, I'm actually going to give it back to the youngest of our generation. I'm going to give them a wicked problem. And I'm going to say, hey, like we're trying to tackle diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're a 20-something-year-old, right? You're a 30-something-year-old. Can you guys come? We will split people up in different groups, and they will be so different. And I want you to try to solve this problem. How would you solve the problem? What would you do? And can I tell you, the feedback that came back to us was shocking, amazing, interesting, and very practical. The fundamental results came back, said, the younger generation said, hey, listen, for us to understand each other better, to understand our differences better, we need to get to know each other more at a fundamental human level. I have a daughter and I have two sons. And it's normal for some people to say, well, girls shouldn't do this, or girls should be in the kitchen and boys should not. And I'm like, what? I am not raising two lazy people that I have to take care of for the rest of my life. You better get up and go to the kitchen. You don't need to be a woman to like understand how to make something for yourself to eat, right? So just, it starts by those, we even all of us like starts by those types of things. It's also going back to school, being a very vocal advocate in school for your kids. Because I live in a community where my kids are like 1% Black. I mean, they make up
Mhm.
the diversity quota. Let's just put it that way. And I
Mhm.
only have three. So, so you can imagine the first time we got to this school, they were calling me every other week. Oh, tell me about your children and tell me about this and why did they do that? And first I was like upset. And then I said, listen, Amasade, every time something needs to drastically change, sometimes it just doesn't feel good. So maybe they're going through a change trying to understand how to deal here, and you're going through a change trying to break the norm and change the faces of the people in this community.
Exactly on point of children. My daughters are pretty much raised in the US, yet they go through the same problems that I went through once. The question is why, right? They are raised in this system. So there is no quality gap or capability gap. They went through the same education system, high schools, colleges. Why they face these issues while getting internships? Why they face these issues while they are on the job? Um, so these questions remain unanswered. And we are really around the time of wrapping up today's podcast. So I'll leave Amosity and Zara for any final comments.
Well, we are all one humanity on this planet and very diverse, expressing diversity, right? All the time, everywhere. So the question is, how do we change the perception that the other one is so different from me that I may not have any kind of connection with them at all, and it won't matter if I don't treat them equitably. That perception needs to change. And one of the big elephants in the rooms is the media that has talk about the next generation. If the media continues to dominate the minds of the younger generation without any change whatsoever as we head into a brave new world, then our task here will be much, much harder. So we need to work a little bit harder to have a voice in the community, to get involved within the community. Certainly, it all starts at home, but community engagement, cultural events, all of that is very, very important to keep all of that alive. That's my comment on all of this.
Well said, Azara. And I'll add to that. Um, so Lakshmi and I we go back a while.
Yep.
I don't know how many years now.
10 years,
Easy,
15 years.
easy 15 years, right? And when
Mhm.
I say we go back, we were the first that during that 15 years, I felt like we were all sort of like a test case, right? There was me that was black, it was Lakshmi, it was a number of people. Everybody was a little bit different. Italian, Chinese, and we were all in this big room and we worked together very closely for 2 years, 2+ years, right? And it was, and still like that closeness, the times when we would all meet up in the lunchroom and sit down and question one of our colleagues who liked to have, his motto was, I'm going to eat 5 different ingredients every day. Because why not? I'm in America. There's ingredient galore. So why should I stick to whatever I grew up with? I should open my mind. So just being able to make that connection, connecting with different people, the dinners, the understanding what makes that person tick versus the other. Where do we have commonality? Where do we have differences? And then fast forward, I know that Lakshmi produces these beautiful, beautiful theater shows and displays of, to carry forward culture and history and build community. And I was very privileged to join that with my family. And I'll tell you, when my family drove away, my kids said, "Wow, mom, that was fascinating. What was this and what was that and what was the other?" And that opened up a lot of conversations, right? So back to like, there's still lots of questions. How do we leave this? What's the solution? I think human connection, understanding where we have commonalities, just that small, even just connecting with someone on just how they are feeling because you see them at that moment and you've been in that moment and you recognize it and you say, you know what? I know how you're feeling right now. And let me follow you to go do that thing, right? That sense of caring, kindness, because you know that in any point in time in life that might actually happen to you. We have to continue to carry that forward. It's up. If you see something, say something. We've been raised to, and from this call I can tell we all care. We're very passionate, and so we've got to take up a little bit of space in the rooms where it matters to make sure that we're really having a different conversations about these types of things. It's not just about a small program. Let's put a buddy program together. Done. Check the box on diversity. It's an investment in our future. It's an investment in our generations, right? It's an investment that we're making. And sometimes, like with all good things, you may not see the value right now, 3 months, 6 months,
Mhm.
but just small deposits of being thoughtful about human connections, changing the status quo, starting with you, challenging your bias, making sure the education around bias is not just a one time thing. It is a
Mhm.
continuous process because we all know as humans, we have to continue to evolve. And that evolution requires continuous education, right? And
Right.
knowledge and making sure we're staying up to. So it's taking that. It's a lot like Azara said, it's going to be hard. It's going to get a little harder before it gets easier. But I firmly believe that the actions we take, the as leaders, the intentions, the voices, the issues we choose to stand by and raise up, if we continue at that pace, I think we're going to see a difference, right? But but that said, I also think we it's up to us to say what is the solution from a corporate perspective, and then where are the best places to try? Because some organizations have made a lot of progress, others are still working through it. So how do we
Correct.
take the bright spots and then bring that and say, oh, here's something that works. Let's try it here, there, so on and so forth.
Correct. And we'll close this podcast by saying that diversity is a concept which is intangible and it has a lot of potential to produce tangible results, both for the businesses and for us personally. We can't shy away from our commitment to diversity by doing some social activity, some social tangible activity like planting a tree or helping a kid. Diversity should be embedded. It's an intangible embedded into our minds right from the beginning. So with that said, I thank you, Amasadi, for being here. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, both of you. Omosity, I hope we can continue this conversation at a future date.
Hey, I'm open. Yes, let's do it.
Great.